The world may have had contact moments that were written off as weather, military testing, or rumor. Welcome to Terra Chrono. If you like archive stories where one unexplained detail refuses to disappear, like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This episode is a working review of 5 historic cases that still sit between 2 labels. First, it probably happened, and second, we probably saw it wrong. At first glance, these are familiar stories. A bright object in the sky, an emergency report from a small town, officials who changed their story after days of noise. No proof, and yet no complete peace of mind. But when patterns repeat across eras, it is hard to ignore the question, did these incidents happen once, or did we fail to build the language for repeated contact? For this episode, we will give each case the time it deserves. Each section is designed around a 3-minute close look. Not because every case is equal, because we want the same standard of attention, so the method itself is visible. The same camera distance, the same comparison rule, the same ending question, what changed when uncertainty became official? Case 1 starts with a mythic reference from old oral traditions. In many oral traditions, skylights are not treated as objects first. They are treated as omens, warnings, punishments, or omens that arrived at the wrong hour. Noisy fields, isolated villages, a fire on the horizon, a long lingering shadow. People remember these moments in a language of meaning, not in a language of instruments. Centuries later, when modern investigators search the same event for a technical signal, the original vocabulary is already gone. That is the first trap. The evidence is not only what happened, the evidence is also what vocabulary was available to describe it. This is why this first section is not proof of hidden aliens. It is a control group. It tests whether we confuse a language gap with a lie. The old record says one thing in emotion and one thing in survival logic. Officials in more formal systems later read that same story and translate urgency into process. Notice the timing of that translation. An eyewitness cry becomes civic rumor. Civic rumor becomes clerical summary. Clerical summary becomes nothing unusual to retain. A village warning becomes a safe line in a record. A safe line becomes a stable memory. A stable memory becomes a closed file. There is no villain in this section. There is a chain reaction of interpretation under uncertainty. That is the first lesson we want to keep visible in this file. The old event is not automatically the false event, and the modern archive is not automatically the true event. Only a controlled comparison is useful. Case 2 is the Year Zero Horizon reference from early imperial and classical chronicles. The second section goes back to the first centuries before the modern state and the first bureaucratic habit of cataloguing sky events. Now the record is richer in one sense. Empires kept calendars and officials wrote in sequence. But it is also stranger in another sense. A strange event can live as a court curiosity, a military memo, or a temple warning, all at once. A streak of lights, a sudden column of brightness, a shape at a known altitude, no radar logs, no audio recordings, no satellite timestamps. And yet there are repeated entries. Some mention distance, some mention direction, some repeat sequence, appearing, fading, returning. If we treat these as raw technical data, we risk forcing a modern category onto a pre-modern archive. If we treat them only as myth, we risk losing the operational pattern. So this section asks, how could a court report and a military watchlog describe the same event yet insist on different meanings? For the archive builder, contradiction is not always a flaw. Contradiction is sometimes a stress test. From a modern lens, this looks like a contradiction. From an archive lens, it is a record of pressure. The record tells us what institutions could carry forward and what they could not afford to carry. Could it have been meteorological? Could it have been astronomical, of course? Could it have been optical? Could it have been panic around an actual explainable disturbance? All 3 are possible. And still something in the chain remains unresolved. Why was the description preserved and then narrowed so aggressively? If there is no hidden craft, the record still teaches us what institutions do with incomplete evidence, because what we now call data did not exist then. Only layers of trust did. Trust in the witness, trust in the priest, trust in the messenger, trust in the censor. Then trust is converted into silence, and silence is converted into a stable public story. When the confidence chain is short, a strange event stays narrow and local. When the confidence chain is long, a strange event becomes a historical category. Case 3 returns to a documented 1500s event, Nuremberg in 1561. This is our first near-modern test. In this section, we finally have a civic record with specific timing, witnesses, and civic publication behavior. The account has shape. There are reported formations, there are descriptions of geometry and movement, and there are later interpretations that keep shifting to fit a safer social order. The scene becomes public in multiple versions. Citizens speak in one grammar, administrators write in another. Later historians produce a third. The dramatic line everyone remembers is stable. The technical line everyone argues about is not. So we hold the civic memory as both artifact and instrument. It is both a witness and a filter. In practical terms, this is why this section does not end with proven or deny. It ends with the operational question: what did the official chain remove from witness energy? When we track the textual chain, we find a recurring mechanism. First, uncertainty is translated into wonder, then into hazard, then into social anxiety, then into a short explanatory clause. At each step, detail is either preserved as evidence or removed as risk. For contact interpretation, this is a key threshold. If what was reported was impossible, the archive still demands a survivable sentence. If what was reported was ordinary, the archive still demands a short sentence. Either path produces the same visible result. Institutional memory does not remember everything equally. It keeps what can be copied. It edits what can create uncertainty. Case 4 shifts to a 1800s sky anomaly cluster where reports survived in print and were later reframed as ordinary weather. Now we enter a world where printed media, telegraph-era updates, and municipal records begin moving faster. This is important because here we can compare two systems side by side. Someone in a town sees something strange. Someone in a nearby office decides how to record it. Somewhere between those two acts, a story gets compressed. In these 19th century records, we see the same pattern repeated with better tools and less ambiguity control. A bright object, multiple civilian witnesses, a description that sounds confident in the first 24 hours. Then a second cycle of language, weather, atmospheric artifact, optical anomaly. The phrase, ordinary weather, appears early, then disappears, then appears as a final label. This is not a scandal in itself. It is a bureaucratic style. Turn the unresolved into the administratively safe. And this is when journalism becomes memory management. The question is not, did a craft come down and leave no trace? The question is, why does the report form absorb the unusual so quickly? In this section, we do not punish the period. People in the 1800s did not have weather radar. They had paper, rumours, church bells, and district clerks. But they also had enough witnesses to tell us that something moved outside normal expectation. The archive then becomes a map of what society could accept in print before it became official doctrine. This is a direct warning to modern media habits. A story that is repeated with certainty can still be a product of closure, not revelation. This section becomes the bridge to the 20th century. Because by this point the language has moved from village note to newsprint, but the speed of closure has accelerated faster than the quality of uncertainty. Case 5 reaches the 1900s, where modern reporting, military observers, and civil records started colliding for the first time. In this final case, all the modern advantages are in place. Telephones, base procedures, rescue responses, chain of command language, and stronger expectations of accountability. And yet we still see the same architecture. There is a recorded event, a community reaction, search operations, and a final official simplification. No wreckage confirmed in the public record. No cinematic final body. No indisputable ending. Just shoreline, roads, radio chatter, interviews, and a timeline that hardens over time into one sentence. When a modern system has more instruments, we assume it should produce more truth. But truth is not only about instruments. Truth is also about who gets to define enough information. In this section, we watch an entire century of method trying to do three jobs at once: protect the public, protect institutions, protect certainty. In modern doctrine, all three may be necessary. In an ideal world, they would support one another. In historical archives, they often do not. That is when the sharp question is buried under acceptable phrasing. Case 5 tries to show that friction, not failure, might be the common denominator. In doing so, it may also protect ambiguity by design. So if we are mapping these 5 cases together, the lesson is a process map, a repeatable loop where unusual input enters, administrative language edits it, and public narrative exits. Across all 5 cases, the repeated pattern is the same. The Sky event looked clear in the moment. The archive looked clear after it was filed. But there is a stubborn gap between what happened and what was retained. The same gap appears in documents, in witnesses, in military responses. The moment of uncertainty is the signal, not always the object itself. Not every unresolved event is evidence of contact. Some are evidence of poor interpretation windows. Some are evidence of systems that could not afford open uncertainty. Some may be evidence of events that we still do not have the right frame to describe. If we are honest with the evidence, we should not force a single conclusion. We should test for structure. Who had authority to close the case? Who had the power to define what was normal? Who had the power to decide what remained open for the next generation? What did they choose to repeat, and what did they choose to redact in memory? This is the recurring machine of modern uncertainty. First, excitement. Then, administrative compression. Then, a stabilized ending. That same machine exists in our time. The final question of this episode is not sensational. It is procedural. Did we fail to see contact, or did we never agree on what to call the moment when the known met the unknown? Maybe both are true. Maybe this is not about proving one extraordinary event. Maybe it is about discovering how every era inherits unfinished records as a way of preserving order. The 5 cases are not a verdict. They are a pressure map. If anyone was missed contact, the cost is not embarrassment. The cost is a missing training pattern in our own institutional memory. It is why this series keeps returning to old files. We are not trying to close the case. We are trying to see where closure happened too quickly. If this review changed how you watch a headline, a weather log, or a military memo, then this one did its job. Like this, if you want more archive breakdowns where old mysteries are treated as evidence architecture, not punchline.